Your brain functions as two separate hemispheres, the left side and the right side. And here's where things get genuinely weird. Each hemisphere controls the opposite side of your body. Makes perfect sense, right? Absolutely not confusing whatsoever. For roughly 90% of people on this planet, the left hemisphere dominates their brain function, which explains why their right hand becomes their primary tool for writing, eating, and performing virtually every manual task imaginable. Left-handed people represent the fascinating minority. Their right hemisphere takes command, making their left hand the dominant one for daily activities. Understanding why this happens isn't straightforward because there's no single explanation. Instead, it's an intricate combination of genetic inheritance and environmental factors working together in complex ways. Most likely, some subtle variation occurs during fetal brain development that provides the right hemisphere with slightly enhanced activity or strength, tipping the scales toward left-hand dominance. This developmental shift happens early, probably during pregnancy, when the brain is forming its fundamental structures and establishing neural pathways. The specific mechanisms remain somewhat mysterious, but researchers believe it involves differences in how neurons connect and organize themselves during critical developmental windows. Some theories suggest hormonal influences during gestation might play roles, while others point to asymmetries in how the brain physically develops. Whatever the exact cause, the result is clear. Approximately 10% of humanity ends up with right hemisphere dominance that manifests as left-handedness. If left-handedness frequently appears within families, genetics must provide the complete answer, correct? Well, the reality is more nuanced. Scientists haven't identified a single left-handed gene responsible for this trait. Instead, research suggests multiple genes collaborate in influencing hand preference, creating a polygenic trait rather than a simple genetic switch. For example, when parents are left-handed, their children face a substantially higher probability of becoming lefties themselves, perhaps around 25 to 30%. However, even in these genetically favorable circumstances, right-handedness remains the more common outcome. This demonstrates that genetics alone doesn't entirely determine hand dominance. Environmental factors during development, prenatal conditions, and perhaps even random developmental variations all contribute to the final result in ways researchers are still working to completely understand. The genuine mystery isn't explaining why some individuals become left-handed. The real puzzle is understanding why the overwhelming majority of humanity became right-handed in the first place. If hand dominance were purely random or neutral from an evolutionary perspective, you'd reasonably expect something approximating a 50-50 split between left and right preference across populations. Obviously, that's not what happened. Evolution and cultural development provide compelling explanations for this asymmetry. Throughout human history spanning thousands of generations, most individuals relied predominantly on their right hand for crafting tools, manufacturing weapons, performing intricate tasks, and handling essential survival activities. As societies developed increasingly complex technologies and social structures, they naturally organized themselves around right-handed norms. Tools were designed for right-handed users. Writing systems developed that favored right-hand movement. Social customs and etiquette evolved assuming right-hand dominance. This created powerful feedback loops that reinforced right-handedness across generations and cultures worldwide. However, being left-handed wasn't entirely disadvantageous throughout history. In certain contexts, left-handedness provided genuine competitive advantages that helped the trait persist despite societal pressure toward right-handedness. Combat situations particularly favored left-handed fighters. Most warriors and soldiers trained extensively against right-handed opponents because that's what they encountered most frequently. Facing a left-handed adversary disrupted their practiced defensive patterns, reaction timings, and spatial expectations. That surprise factor translated into real tactical advantages that could mean survival in life or death encounters. In modern competitive athletics, particularly combat sports like boxing, fencing, and mixed martial arts, left-handed competitors continue demonstrating statistical advantages. Their opponents typically lack extensive experience countering their unique angles, movements, and attack patterns. That unfamiliarity creates openings and opportunities that skilled left-handed athletes exploit effectively. Here's the critical consideration that explains the evolutionary equilibrium, though. Fighting ability alone doesn't construct functional civilizations or ensure long-term survival. Humans succeeded as a species primarily through cooperation, resource sharing, collaborative problem solving, and collective building efforts. The tools, manufacturing processes, writing systems, architectural designs, and societal structures that emerged were overwhelmingly created. For right-handed users, because that's what the majority needed, trying to operate in a world designed for right-handed people created genuine disadvantages for lefties in daily life. Using scissors, writing without smudging ink, operating machinery, even simple tasks like opening doors or using can openers became more difficult. Evolution essentially discovered a balanced equilibrium point. Left-handedness remained beneficial enough in certain competitive scenarios to persist in the human gene pool without disappearing entirely. The trait never became eliminated despite societal pressures because it provided occasional but real advantages, yet left-handedness never became prevalent enough to shift societal standards or redesign the tools and systems everyone depended upon. The minority status of left-handedness represents not a disadvantageous mutation that should have been selected against, but rather a balanced polymorphic trait that provided context-dependent advantages while remaining uncommon enough to avoid disrupting cooperative social systems built around right-handed norms. So unless something distinctive occurred during your specific brain's developmental process, probability strongly favored you becoming right-handed simply because that's the dominant pattern evolution in society reinforced over countless generations. Left-handers represent the fascinating minority who diverged from that trend, carrying forward a trait that's simultaneously disadvantageous for tool use, yet advantageous in competitive scenarios. It perfectly illustrates how human variation reflects complex evolutionary pressures, genetic variations, and developmental processes all working together.